and down this heavy ground.
Son of a bitch!
I have to admit I was initially disappointed when Matthew Vaughn, director of one of my all-time favourite films, X-Men First Class, announced that he would be stepping down from the role of director for its sequel, X-Men Days of Future Past, and instead take on a different comic book adaptation in the form of Kingsman: The Secret Service. However, not only was the disappointment quelhed last year when Days of Future Past turned out to be almost the equal of First Class, but it was totally eradicated after the end credits rolled on Kingsman. If Matthew Vaughn had to abandon X-Men for another film, I'm sure glad it was this one. As both a parody and a homage to classic spy films, Kingsman is both a brilliant comedy and a brutal action roller coaster. Well deserving of its R rating, Kingsman may be the most shockingly violent mainstream film to hit cinemas this year. However, much like with Vaughn's previous ultra-violent comic book on screen that was Kick-Ass, the violence is so over the top to the point where it becomes an integral part of the visual identity of the film. Yes, it's brutal, but when it's accompanied by a killer soundtrack and the superb action direction that Vaughn has honed over the years, everything comes together and ultimately culminates in what is arguably the film's most brilliant sequence that will be sure to have a lot of people talking, some complaining and others even offended. Safe to say, if you've seen Kingsman already, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I don't want to spoil it for you, but the knowledge of the fact that the scene has been cut from several countries is testimony to how close to the line the sequence is. Make sure if you see Kingsman, you experience the full uncut version. But of course, a film can't just survive on the quality of its action alone, so thankfully there's a wonderful plot threaded throughout. Feeling like somewhat of a dual narrative for the first two acts, the film splits between Taron Egerton's Eggsy going through a rigorous training process in order to become a Kingsman, and Colin Firth's Harry Hart attempting to reveal the dubious plans of Samuel L. Jackson's Richmond Valentine. As time goes on, the two narratives start to entangle and become a unified whole and have much more bearing on each other than is initially apparent. Much like previous Matthew Vaughn efforts, the film's world building, there's that word I love again, is heavily woven into the forward-moving plot so that it happens organically yet at a rapid-fire rate. I don't know if they're gunning for a franchise here, but there's definitely enough implied history and potential for future stories outlined in this film to warrant it. Vaughn also uses this now almost auteur-like vibrant colour palette that makes the film feel alive and fresh. In direct contrast to a lot of other blockbusters continuously drawing on black and greys, Kingsman reminds us what colour is. Elevating all the material is the presence of A-list actors portraying the Kingsman, which not only adds gravitas to the characters, but to the film itself. The aforementioned Colin Firth is joined by Michael Caine and Jack Davenport, and there's even an extended cameo by Mark Hamill, a wonderful bit of casting for those familiar with the original Kingsman comic. Perhaps stealing the show though is Mark Strong, who seems to fit his character so well and handles it with the perfect mix of self-awareness and seriousness that this kind of genre asks for. It seems almost pointless to highlight any of Kingsman's shortcomings, as several of them could almost be considered to be intentional homages to the format of old spy films. Richmond Valentine's plan is ridiculous and some would say convoluted, but seeing as that's the MO of most old Bond villains, can a film that directly pays tribute to those films be criticised for doing the same thing? By film's end, it's quite amazing how much content Vaughn has managed to cram into 2 hours without any of it feeling rushed, forced in, or better off left out of the film. With Kingsman, he has truly proven that he is one of the most talented action directors of our generation, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with next. In short, go see Kingsman. It's really, really good. Thank you so much for watching. If you've seen Kingsman, tell me what you thought down in the comments below. Also, make sure you check out last week's video, which is also kind of down below, but not as far, where I talk about The Lord of the Rings and whether it should be turned into a television series or not.